Hello, I'm Roaster Cat, and I'm here with Brett Donahue at Counterculture Coffee in Durham, North Carolina. Brett, welcome. Thank you for having me for this conversation. And would you just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you do here at Counterculture?
Sure. Once again, great to have you. Thanks for taking the time to stop by Counterculture. Yeah, my name is Brett Donahue. I'm the Eastern Roasting Supervisor at our Durham headquarters. I'm managing a team of roasters, roasting machines, and ordering a lot of coffee. Counterculture is about to turn 30, and I'm lucky enough to have been here for 15 of those years. So seen a lot of change, a lot of growth, a lot of projects coming to fruition over a number of years.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, 15 years is a good long time, and half the company's existence. So I'm sure that you've seen a lot of things over the course of those 15 years. I kind of want to just kick off with how have things changed, or how has your role really changed at Counterculture from when you started to now?
Sure. When I first started, I just wanted a job in the coffee industry. I was sick of being a barista. And I knew that Counterculture was a few hours away from where I was living, and just applied for a production job, took the plunge and moved out here. I had a few friends in the area, so it was kind of a cool fit. In the first 2 years, I worked as a shipper and a bagger, kind of learning all of the customers that we were servicing up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and also learning about some of the guiding principles of the company, like at least on the production side, freshness, consistency, quality, all of that. After that, I was lucky enough to be around when there was an opening for a roaster apprentice, and applied for it, was lucky enough to get it, and I've been in the roasting department ever since.
Amazing. So in this interview, I kind of want to go through Counterculture's approach to coffee from green to roasted and from theoretical to practical. And I assume in your 15 years, you've seen kind of different iterations of that. So what would you say now is the way Counterculture thinks about coffee?
We're talking about green to roasted, theoretical and practical. Mm-hmm. And then the question is,
how does Counterculture think about coffee? Basically, how does Counterculture approach coffee?
Oh, sure.
It's a big question.
Sure. I think I'll have to speak for our coffee buying team here, but we do have a lot of emphasis on maintaining a diverse supply of coffee from long-term partnerships where possible. And we're also focusing on bringing coffees in that are clean, have inherent sweetness, have nuance, generally have some sort of, once again, I'll mention long-term partnership potential. And we're also looking to kind of maintain sustainability and pushing certain projects to improve cup scores, improve consistency, and also improving the whole supply chain in that mix.
Cool. And you mentioned coffee buyers. So then moving to the practical, what is Counterculture's, from the moment a coffee enters the conscious of Counterculture until the moment that it's in a bag? What is that process like? How many people go through?
Sure. So our buying and sourcing team generally gets an arrival sample. They'll check it for quality, make maybe a last minute determination in terms of what product it'll go into or what rate it'll be blended. I get that information and then just make sure that I bring those coffees in at the right time for the right products. So
you're creating the contracts and things.
I'm not necessarily doing the contracts, but when coffees arrive stateside, I'll pull them in from our external warehouse, which isn't nearly as complex as contracting, but it does still involve a level of understanding of it does involve a level of intuiting what we're going to need with fluctuations in volume. I think any sort of coffee roastery or food industry understands that there are seasonal fluctuations, daily fluctuations. So we're trying to bring in just enough coffee to get us through the week without a ton of excess. And so I generally order about 2 to 3 trucks a week, just constantly restocking the supply that we've got in the green warehouse. There's a lot of kind of communication channels that then go to the roasting department, which bags to grab, which ICOs to look out for, how to construct blends or how to program silo to spit out blends in the right ratio. And then they're also doing the work of looking closely at the actual product, making sure that things are smelling right, tasting good. Essentially, it's the QC loop that's at the end of every single roast cycle.
Mm-hmm. And what does the QC loop look like? Do you cup every batch? I saw the Agtron in there.
Sure. At the volume we're running, we don't cup every single batch, but we are sending samples of the full product mix to our QC and buying team. So there is a feedback loop there.
The buyers are then also QCing once it's roasted as well. So there's full.
And that helps them make determinations. If a coffee is too acidic for one product, they might shift it towards another. If a coffee is tasting light and underdeveloped, we get that information back pretty quickly. But we also maintain some layer of that within the roasting department. The Agtron is very helpful and very essential. What it does is it takes out a sense of bias in the process. So I can think that I've got the perfect recipe or sort of profile for any one of our coffees, but the coffee is going to change over time. The machines kind of have different behavior patterns over time. So what the Agtron does is it's an immediate sense of feedback. Like I gave this coffee certain inputs, and this is what I actually get out. And this is actually very causally connected to what the customer will taste. Shades of brown seem a bit arbitrary, but there are all sorts of connections to like the lightness or darkness of that coffee having an impact on body, sweetness, acidity. So it's a great way for us to catch a batch that maybe has slipped out of profile.
Yeah, and with a company with 30 years of data, 30 years of experience, I'm sure you've got all of that kind of fleshed out.
Yeah, so there are plenty of reference points. Every coffee has its own Agtron target. And then we also try to work QC in reverse. So if we're hitting the right Agtron and we're tasting that coffee and it's not tasting right, then we need to make determinations. Do we extend certain phases of the roast? Do we slow it down? Do we reduce the batch size so we can, detail the curve a little bit better? So the Agtron is really instrumental for us, and it also has like this moment of bliss for the roasters. Like, they have seen this.
I did it right.
Right? It's like, oh, aha, like I added knowledge to this process. I did things in a consistent manner, or I tried something new and I got a good result. There's a sensory hit from it too. You get just that first puff of aromatics. And I think it also helps the roasters see that they're a really unique hinge point in the company. The whole supply chain is really important, right? We have this tiny little tiny moment where we can affect change for the better. And that does good on the labor of the many people who have come before and sort of the customer base beyond.
Yeah, so you're like this critical hinge point, maybe 10, 12, 15 minutes of time, but you can either ruin it for everyone or make it great for everyone.
Sure. And I think that's the real hook, right? We get to engage with this like real, raw, and rare thing in a way that most folks don't get to, but they also get to enjoy the benefit of that anyways.
Yeah. That's a really cool way of thinking about it. I feel like I've heard a lot of people, a lot of roasters say, I can only preserve or mess it up from this point out, but I really like the kind of like standing in the middle, looking both ways, being like, I can ruin it for everyone or I can make everybody have a good time.
Sure.
In this chain.
And I would also mention, like, coffee has a range of expressions, right? If it's a little bit off spec on the color or it's a little bit long or short in terms of the roast, if there's a competent, engaged roaster at the machine, it's still going to taste really great and we'll find a home for it. So I do agree with you though, like we can't really improve on the raw coffee. Like everything's already there. We're trying to find the right way to express those inherent qualities.
Yeah. And so in terms of expressing the inherent qualities, counterculture clearly has some single origins and some blends. Do you have different approaches to a single origin offering versus a blend?
Sure. Yes. So roast level would be one major distinction. Single origins, we reserve the lighter end of the roast spectrum for those because we do want there to be an emphasis on that connection to where it comes from, right? We want it to have typicity, I think is a term they use in the wine industry, but terroir is, maybe an outmoded term in the industry right now. I'm not sure. But we really want Yirgacheffe coffees to taste floral, lemony, black tea, For a product like Apollo, though, it's always Ethiopian coffee. We would call it a year-round product that always has washed Ethiopian coffee. We bring that a few notches deeper in terms of roast level, and that makes it a bit more accessible, easier to brew, pull shots of. but it still has that same connection to place because there's still like a nice layer of that sort of Ethiopian pop.
And do you do pre-roast blending or post-roast blending for most of the blends?
It's a good question. When I first started, everything was post-roast blended. We had a blending tray in the middle of the facility and we were roasting kind of second wavy profiles. So like Sumatran French, Vienna roast, like we had several espresso components and they would all get blended post-roast. That became a major hassle. And we also reduced the list of blends that we had from like 100 down to 7 that we have currently. And green blending became a new skill for us at that point. So almost not every coffee is green blended, but I would say most are. We also try to find coffees that have the right harmonic with each other. So for Big Trouble, right now it's a blend of Peruvian and Colombian coffees. And we can, with a close eye, we can sort of do the best thing for both of those coffees in the drum.
Yeah, very cool. Counterculture, do you have any cafes? You do is it all wholesale?
It's all training centers, and wholesale. That's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's some other. Yeah, I don't think there's really any other exception to that.
Yeah. I'm trying. Like the reason that I asked that is because I'm thinking about like different points of quality control or like feedback. But you guys offer in all of your training labs a weekly cupping open to the public. Is that right?
Yeah, Fridays at 10 a.m. And generally that moved from like folks from the public actually going from like the traditional style of cupping, right? Like so shaking the bowl, breaking the crust, all of that, to more of like a producer focus or like a spotlight moment. So generally we'll highlight a single origin or single farmer coffee, sometimes in comparison with the coffee that we have from like the larger community around that one single origin. So there's generally some sort of point of contrast or focus on something unique about that coffee.
Cool. And you have training centers kind of all over the country.
I've lost count, yeah. Sort of cluster both coasts, but we do have one in Dallas, Chicago, I think they're still considering another.
Yeah, nice. So do all of the training centers for every weekly cupping, do they use the same coffee so everyone's getting the same experience? I
believe so. Yeah, we ship out coffee for brewing, sometimes for pulling shots of espresso. Yeah, it should be the same for it's a way that we sort of align our education department with what's going on in the coffee world.
And is all of the coffee for all of Counterculture roasted here in this facility?
No, I want to say the majority is. I can't pull a percentage off the top of my head. We have another roastery in the Bay Area, California, outside of Oakland called Emeryville, with a really crack roasting team out there they're growing exponentially right now and doing a really great job. They just got a second lowering, so they're starting to like gear up for the same sort of growth that we're seeing.
Yeah. Do you guys roast the same profiles, or how do you? Is it one is West Coast style, one's East Coast style?
There's a bit of market differentiation there. They're free to roast their profiles and hit their roast levels in the way that they think best serves that sort of customer base. So on the West Coast, they're servicing pretty much like from Texas over. Yeah, I imagine there's a slight difference in preferences for coffee drinkers in Seattle, San Francisco, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I think the trend for specialty coffee is kind of all over the place right now. And I do think with the proliferation of other like micro roasters, nano roasters and whatnot, there are a lot of folks who are doing really unique things with coffee. So I don't think I'm totally up to date with those trends.
Yeah, but you know what you guys are up to here. And I feel like, Counterculture has been around, as you said, for 30 years and been a leader in the specialty industry from its inception. Where do you see, like, how does Counterculture continue to play in or like lead the industry as we're going now? It's a big question.
Sure. Well, I don't want to be presumptuous and
because I think that is something that's important, or that's something that's interesting to note, is that, Counterculture started a lot smaller and now has obviously grown to a very like large roaster. And I think small roasters look to folks like Counterculture as examples of how to kind of come up in the...
Sure, yeah, that's a great point. So I think we try to put our best foot forward in a few ways. We have some sort of commitments that we're very public about, or sort of guiding ethos in terms of why we buy what we buy, why we choose the coffees that we choose. And a lot of that's in our transparency report, and that gets published annually. It's on the webpage, and we go through and sort of detail very, very like transparently, like what we're paying for each cooperative that we're working with, or each coffee project we're working with. We're very public about our commitment towards organic and sort of like ecologically friendly coffee growing methods, like biodiversity rather than sort of clear cutting and just growing a bunch of coffee plants. But to go back to the transparency report, I think that's something that we started maybe 10 years ago. And I think that was maybe a new thing in the industry, where we were saying, like, we claim we do certain things, but here's some proof to it, or here's some like nuts and bolts to what we're actually doing. And so I think that's a pretty profound thing that we do. I think I mentioned this on the floor a bit, but in terms of like green and roasted, or green and roasting departments, we try to maintain as close of a beat on quality as possible. Just in terms of the industry, I think we're trying to grow, but maintaining our sort of values. We're trying to grow, but also sort of stay true to those commitments. And it's not always an easy path. Like, we don't always know what the best course is there. But one thing that I think like we've stood on and kind of is a notable thing every year is that the grower groups, producer partnerships, farmers that we work with, we prefer long-term partnerships there, and that's to avoid volatility, to maintain a, not homogenous, but a rugged supply chain, but also for the benefit of both parties. I was looking at some stats on this recently. Something like almost 20% of the groups and producers that we work with, we've worked with for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And I want to say well over half we've been working with for over 10 years. So there's definitely a trend of sort of maintaining those relationships. And I can find the actual number for you. It might be as high as 70% in terms of, I want to say 70% are partners that we've worked with for 5 or more years.
Wow.
So I think that's another thing that we sort of stand on in terms of the industry.
Yeah, which, I mean, the more and more I'm learning about green buying and the entire supply chain, that's really the best way for both a company to assure, as you said, their chain, but also for a producer to know that they'll have sales, they'll have somewhere for their coffee to go year over year, which creates a more stable chain in a super volatile environment.
Yeah, we also have you're right. And I think one thing that you're talking about, producers having, capital, or did you mention something about money?
Yeah, like that yeah.
Yeah. We also offer grants through certain coffee projects that we do seasonally, which go directly towards like community programs or infrastructure build out. Also, the way that we do contracting kind of helps maintain like a flow of investment money that those producers can put back into their farm, like composting or variety separation, or trying things out in the nursery. Yeah, so I think that's another added benefit, is that as we sort of lean on these values, we also get sort of improvements in quality, improvements in consistency.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
So I think maybe an important component of like product mix, roast levels, blend levels, that sort of thing is pretty well established at this point. We are green blending most of our year-round coffees, but we know each of those has a pretty static roast level. The roasting process does a ton to sort of make coffees consistent. So as we're going through lots quickly, like say weekly in some cases, we have to have a way that maintains consistency sort of week over week. So if someone's buying Big Trouble, they're not getting wildly different experiences. So the roast level is one way we maintain that, but we also maintain that by assessment of what the blend should be. And generally that's done by the coffee buyers and the QC folks. So Big Trouble is typically a medium roast. Generally, we're not looking for high acidity there. So we also use the green blending process or green selection process to drive what's going to show up in that coffee. And the sourcing is also part of that too. They know that they're sourcing certain coffees from certain regions, which will work nicely into that product. And the same logic applies for almost everything. Single origins are unique in that not only that they're roasted lighter, but they're normally separated out for quality or specificity, variety, something along those lines. Yeah.
And do you bring in like new, I get, or do you put out new coffees on a like regular cadence, or do you pretty much have like your entire year's worth of coffees based on seasonality? How do you decide what goes on your menu?
Sure. Yeah, seasonality plays a lot into it. We're trying to showcase those coffees when they're fresh and recently arrived stateside. But we also don't want so many single origins on the menu that no one knows what to buy and they languish in our warehouse. So generally, there's maybe 3 minimum, maybe a maximum of 8, but that would be sort of an exception. So we're trying to keep a loose single origin menu to break up some of the more static blends that are just on the menu all year round. And we're also generally, we're trying to not overwhelm folks or customers with like one specific style of coffee. So we don't want a glut of naturals on the menu at any one time. We try to have maybe a natural, Wash Central or South American, I feel like East African coffees are, their own unique categories. Maybe that's kind of a boilerplate statement, but generally we're trying to keep a certain representation on the menu at any one time. So if someone really loves like floral coffees, they can find that. If someone likes the fruit bombs, they can find that too.
Very cool. And you kind of mentioned roast degree before, but how is like the roast degree for each coffee determined? Is it like a bunch of trial and error? Is it during like sample roasting?
A lot of it's sort of based on historical knowledge or institutional knowledge. We know that there's a certain range where light roasts are going to taste sweet and developed, but still have, a lot of the top end. And we generally work within that range. If we're finding that we're not getting the flavors we like out of it, we can rethink that. But we start out with a color and then sort of work the profile back from there. This is also part of the feedback loop with the QC team. In terms of year-round coffees, those are generally landing at specific and those are kind of hitting like standardized roast levels.
Sure.
So Big Trouble is very much a medium roast. Fast forward, we would call it medium light. R46 is our darkest roast. It's actually not a French roast technically, it's a Vienna roast because it just gets to the very first couple of pops and second crack. But that's enough to get it to that sort of like rich, chocolatey, smoky range. So we're sort of working with like kind of those basic industry like dark, medium light, etc. But the Agtron is so much more specific than that, and that's sort of what we use to granularly define it.
Yeah. And has Counterculture's roast approach changed over the years that you've been here?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mentioned that we used to just roast components for blending, but our roasting approach has really changed as new folks have come through the department, bringing new ideas in, bringing experience from other roasteries, or just not knowing how to roast. And as we internally teach folks, they start to learn and sort of revise things, or they learn different lessons than we might have. Really the folks in the roasting team have done a lot to kind of codify where we're at in terms of philosophy. The machines also drive a lot of what we do, and kind of learning to roast single origins on the Loring personally helped me kind of rethink a lot of my roasting methodologies. I found it to be, I would like stall batches out or have batches that were completely uncontrollable, and it honestly took someone, a couple of newer folks in the department who had less bias, right?
Who had roasted on probats for a less amount of time, shorter amount of time.
Sure. So definitely having like new voices, new eyes in the department has been really helpful, and it's also just made it more of a collaborative environment. I would also say some of our current coffee buyers also were roasters years ago, and they did a heck of a lot to really sort of build the foundation we're on now. So it does feel like there are a lot of folks in counterculture who have had really positive impacts on this department.
And you mentioned kind of like growth or adding new people. Is the team like, how does the team grow? Do you usually bring someone in on packaging and then from packaging to the roaster, or do you just bring in roasters? Or
we've done it both ways. We've hired internally, and generally there are a couple of folks in production who look across the floor and think like, what are they doing down there? Like that looks difficult or cool or something. And so in the department right now, we have 2 folks who started in production, were promoted into roasting, and that works really, really well. We've also hired a few folks who have roasted at other companies in this area. Yeah, I think that's the place to cut it.
Yeah, sure. And you said there are what, 4 or 5 roasting machines and 7 people in the roasting department?
Yep.
How is the configuration? Do you have, or like how is your schedule made week by week?
It's predicated on our start time, and we have a couple of folks who are here very early in the morning, getting things going. And from that point, we can pretty well define how many pounds we can produce from that starting point. We try to not roast a ton of coffee just for the sake of it, a ton of excess coffee, but generally every day is hitting a sort of level of capacity now. So we generally know if we start at 6 in the morning and run till 6 at night, that's going to be sufficient to produce that day's pounds. So some of it's known, some of it can be calculated out, but a lot of it is just us knowing what the hourly time on the floor needs to be to get things out. We can also get creative with the shifts as well. So if we don't have folks to stay here late, we can have one person roasting on the largest machine rather than spending a lot of time roasting on the smallest machine. So we look at it flexibly too, in terms of like which machines are creating the most impact.
So you do roasting to order.
Yep.
Based on what like wholesale customers or retail are ordering?
Yep.
Cool. And last question, what does a typical day in the roastery look like from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. say?
Sure. So the morning crew comes in, kind of assesses the numbers of the day while the machines are warming up. After the machines have gotten that nice saturation time, they will start the roast list generally with darkest roasts first, and then sort of moving progressively lighter. And that seems to work pretty well for us. Currently, we're slotting a lot of our single origins onto the lowering, just because that machine has, some unique qualities that can really bring out the high notes in coffees. But certainly, we at times will put single origins on the other machines. Once the machines are going, dark roasts are in, a couple of other folks will come in and start to sort of back bar or backfill. So that's when silo loading starts to happen. That's when green movement starts to happen, blend change-ups start up. And sort of, I guess, as we get closer to, say, lunchtime, the first shift starts to take off or step on the auxiliary tasks, chef, warehouse upkeep, that sort of thing. And the later folks step onto the roasters, and that's what we were seeing today on the floor. Cool,
awesome. And do folks take, like, as far as lunches, do people kind of stagger their lunches, or how do like breaks work?
Yeah.
the practical parts.
Yeah, I think we found that if we all shut down for a break at the same time, we lose a sizable chunk of the day. So generally we have one person who's kind of daisy chaining around to each roaster and giving folks breaks. So generally one person's out on break at a time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's really interesting insight into life at Counterculture in the Roastery. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
I hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.